Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda, and February is over. So I'm going to be doing my wrap up of everything that I read in February. And I've been trying to do them in different ways where it's not just standard, like this was the best and this was the worst. But the good news is 3 5-star reads this month and only one 2.5, 2 3s, some 3.5s, but 3 5s. 3 5s. We're going to look at February, and then we'll just take a quick minute and look at everything for the whole year and what that looks like, especially on all the stat stuff. So if you're ready for stats, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to go by standalones first. Then I completed a series. I got caught up in a series, and then we'll talk about the series that I started and that I worked on during February. So first of all, standalones. I read Rental House. That was my first standalone of the month. Also my lowest rated book of the month. 2.5 stars. I did not enjoy this. I talk about this more in my mid-month wrap up. So I'm not going to be going through the first half books as in depth because I already covered them there. So feel free to go check that out. But I did not enjoy it. The next standalone that I read was From a Buick 8 by Stephen King. I gave it 3.5 stars. I talk about it also in that wrap up. And in fact, somebody heard my synopsis of it in that wrap up and said, that sounds like a book I would like. I'm going to go read it. So just because a book was not my favorite does not mean that it's not going to be your favorite or a really good book for you. My next standalone though, 4.5 stars, Breathless. This book set in Nepal was so good and so creepy and atmospheric, and I felt like I was there on the mountain. So that also was the beginning of the month. I talk about that a little bit more in the first half wrap up as well. My next standalone was in the second half of the month. The Night Came with Many Stars. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it. It is historical fiction, and if I read historical fiction a lot, I might not like it. But since it's not a genre that I do like to read a lot of, when I do pick them up, I usually really like them because it's been really far in between me reading them. I can tell, like this month, I read 2 that were technically historical fiction, but one that was fantasy and felt like it was historical fiction with magical realism in it. So it was technically qualified as fantasy, but it felt more historical fiction to me. And so I'm done. I'm like, I don't want to read any more historical fiction for a while. But Night Came with Many Stars was so good. We started out with our main character who, as I'm going to say 14 to 15-year-old girl, was sold or lost by her father in a bet. He put her up as his bet in the poker game they were playing, and he lost. And so he comes home one night and he's like, you're married to this man now, or you will be. He's going to come get you. And I was like, what? So but the dad didn't want to lose her cooking. So literally they made some kind of work around where on the weekends she went to her husband's house, and then during the week she stayed at her dad's house. So just absolute nonsense. Well, we are following her in the past, and then in the present time we are following somebody that we know is sort of related to her, like in some kind of way they're connected. And so as we go through the novel, we figure out how that is. But I like the time jumps back and forth. If that's not something you like, you won't enjoy it. But we're with her in the past, and then we jump forward. But in the past, every time we check back in the past, she's progressing along her life. But when we're in the forward, or this time, we're kind of following one person pretty closely for what's going on with him. And so anyway, I really enjoyed it. I liked it. I wanted to know more about the family and hang out with them more. It was really good. Also, it's set in Kentucky. I don't know that I said that, but Rental House is set in Massachusetts. From a Buick 8, even though it's written by Stephen King, is set in Pennsylvania, not Maine. And then this one, Night Came with Many Stars, was set in Kentucky. And my last standalone that I read is Station 11, which is kind of set in the Great Lakes area. So I picked Michigan, but I'm not sure it's set in multiple places, but that was what I picked. This is a dystopian sci-fi mess. Not a mess. Anyway, there's been a pandemic, or there is a pandemic. We are following. I did not. Oh, I gave it 4 stars. But the thing that I didn't like about it, I was really hovering between a 3.5 and a 4. Like I'm somewhere around there. And I went ahead and went with 4 because of the ending. It ended with hope. And anytime something ends with hope, I like it better. But I also saw that there was an adaptation, and based on just the characters in the adaptation, I don't think it follows the book, because somebody in the TV show has a love interest that definitely don't have in the book. So that, maybe I'll watch it. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of TV. It's hard for me to sit there and watch it. But anyway, I am hovering, like I said, 3.5 to 4 stars, but I went ahead and went with 4. I did not like that we took so long to check back in with people. I started getting lost as to who we were talking about, nor did I care about some of them. Some of them I really cared about. Clark and his whole storyline. If you've read the book, you know which one is Clark. I really cared about his storyline and what was going on with him, and I thought that was very fascinating. But we start out at the very beginning at a performance, at a play. And there are different people there. There's an audience member, there's a actor, there's a tiny girl who is an actress, but a little girl that is in the play as well. And we kind of follow what happens to them. We also have flashbacks. So it takes place, that's the night before the pandemic started. Not really, because it was already happening in the country of Georgia. It's called the Georgian flu. But it got to the U.S. that night or the day before. And so that performance was like the last bit of normalcy in the world before all of this. And so we're following like the audience member. And I thought his story was going to be the most interesting. And I wanted to know more about him and what happened with him, because he's the way that we find out about the pandemic. Like, he gets a phone call from a friend who's a doctor, and he's like, you need to get out of the city now. There's all these things going on and you need to go. And he's like, I can't leave my brother. So there's that whole situation that he's dealing with. And we kind of followed them, but I feel like I wanted more with them. And then at one point we have a traveling performance troupe going around they're going around the Great Lakes area in the North United States. And I wanted more of them, or to know who they were more. There was a whole lot of this person, and they called him like the third guitar and the third violin. I'm like, they have names. So anyway, it was okay. I liked it, and it was okay at the same time. Those are all the standalones that I read. So that means everything else was part of a series. So I said I finished 1, but I actually finished 2. But maybe before we do that, let's talk about the one I'm going to DNF. I finished the book, but I'm going to DNF the series. And the book is Long Live Evil, and the series is called Time of Iron. So ultimately, I just don't care. I got really frustrated. First of all, my coworkers had all read this book by the time I started it. And so 2 chapters in, I said to them, oh, this is who that person is. And of course, they couldn't say anything, but I was totally right. And there was one moment where I was like, oh, maybe it's not. And then I was like, oh no, we're back. It totally is. So I called it from the very beginning. There were way too many little clues and hints. I almost said a clint. That's a clue and a hint together. Anyway, there were too many of those, and I figured it out. So that part, I didn't mind. I don't mind if I guess who it is. I often like that I was right and guessed what it was. It doesn't make it less enjoyable for me. My problem was I just did not care. This woman was horrible to people because she got sucked into a book. That's the premise. She is dying of cancer. She's in the hospital, dying. That very soon will be dead. And somebody shows up and says, hey, you could live if you can get the certain life and death flower in this book. You have 1 month, go. And she wakes up in the book. And she, of course, thinks it's a dream at the beginning. And then she realizes that she's in this book. Well, she's like, nobody's real. They're just characters in a book. Well, I want to be like, girl, you are in the book. If magically you can be put in the book, then magically these people can be real people. Django says hi, by the way. So yes, there is some character growth from that mindset, but it comes to me too little too late. The middle half of this book, if you can make it till they have the ball, there's like a big ball gala type thing that they all go to. If you can make it to there, you can finish the book because it really picks up speed. Things really start to happen. We start to get more POVs outside of her, and that made me like it more because she is not the one. So here's what I'm going to do. I told my coworkers, I said, I'm not reading it anymore, and y'all can just tell me what happens in the books coming up. So that's it. I have DNF'd that series. Now let's talk about what I completed. I read Ready Player 2 earlier in the month, and that completed the Ready Player 1 series. Don't tell me if I'm wrong, but I think there's only those 2 books in the series. I guess tell me if I'm wrong because I do want to read it. I really enjoyed Ready Player 2, but I talked about that in my first wrap up. I also finished Scythe and Sparrow, which means the Ruinous Love trilogy is done for me. I have completed it. I read the whole thing. Book 3, I didn't say. Ready Player 1, I gave 4.5 stars. I definitely liked this book. Scythe and Sparrow, I gave 4 stars. It would have been 4.5 stars, but Fionn made me very angry at a decision that he made about halfway through this novel, and I didn't understand it. It was not really half. Maybe it was even further than halfway, but it made me angry, and I didn't understand why he did it. And I also didn't understand why everybody else thought that would be like the logical next step for him to do. They were all like, oh, well, that was dumb, but I guess that's what you did. Like, nobody was like, dude, this was a very wrong decision that you made. And that, except me. Like, that's what I was thinking. So I was very angry with him about that. But overall, I liked this better. I liked what this had to say about our murderers / characters better than the other 2 books. The other 2 books felt flat a little bit, like the characters were not as robust, which in the first book didn't even matter to me because I was so caught up in the uniqueness of the story. It was the first time I had ever read like a murderous couple is falling in love. And so all of that kind of overshadowed the fact that I didn't really get to know the characters very much. In book 2, I liked it definitely more than book 1, but that's also because it was a fake arranged marriage situation, which I love. So that already made number 2 better than number 1 for me. And then number 3 was setting up to be the best. And then Fionn had to go and do something nonsensical. But anyway, it's done. I have completed it. I'm sorry, in the middle of that, I got cold. I had to go get my jacket. I had to take Django outside. Anyway, I'm back. Now, what did I catch up with? Up to publication, I have read the Bounty Hunter series. This is by A.E. Villa. And for a while, I was just reading these books like as fall asleep materials or when I just needed a break and I didn't want to engage my brain. This was just like a romance series I didn't have to worry about. It's about a group. Well, the Bounty Hunters specifically is about a group of bounty hunters that live in Atlanta, Georgia, and they work with, well, they're kind of tangentially related to the police. There is a group there. That's what started this whole thing. But this is part 5 of the Bounty Hunters thing, and it's called The Next Generation. And so I'm wondering, I talked about this in the first half of the month as well, but I'm wondering if there's even any more books coming. This could be the end of it. I don't know because I've never gone to AEV's website and looked at it. I've just been like, oh, I'm reading through this series of audiobooks because they help me fall asleep. So that is that one, and that is the one that I got caught up with, at least what's been published. Now, first books in a series. Let's talk about those first, and then we'll go, for that one, for Promises, I only gave it 3 stars. It was my least favorite in the whole series. Okay. My first books in a series, starting books, is my first 5 stars of the year, and that was The Humane Society for Creatures and Cryptids. I talked about that in the first month, or the first part of the month wrap up, and it is the first book in a series. It's the only book that's out right now, so actually, I need to say that I am completed up to publication date. I don't know why I didn't do that, but I am. Okay, the next one is called Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey, and the series is called Hot and Hammered, and I read book 1. It was my patron pick for the month, and I read it in the second half of the month. It was so cute and so good. I thought it was going to be more did I say I read it in the second half? I read it in the first half, so I talked about it in that wrap up. But I thought it was going to be more about building and contracting because they own a contract company, a house flipper, but it's not. And I also realized that I already talked about Scythe and Sparrow in the first half, so y'all had to sit through that both times. If you saw that video, I'm sorry. The next first book in a series was definitely the second half of the month, and that was Rivers of London. That's also the name of the series. And in this book, it is a urban fantasy magic policeman. It reminded me in some ways of the Dresden Files, but in some ways it was completely unique. But the rivers in London are gods and goddesses. And we're following a detective who doesn't know about any of that. Like, he finds out that that's a thing in this first book when he gets assigned a job in a certain area of his police precinct that has to do with paranormal things, and he doesn't even know that's a thing. And so we just kind of follow him as he's living his life and finding out these things, and he discovers that magic is real and that he can learn to do magic. So it was really good. I am going to continue in that series. I gave it 4 stars, like a solid 4 stars, and I'm happy with my rating, and I am happy to continue in that series. The next one that I started, the first book in the series, was How to Become the Dark Lord and Die Trying. And I gave this 4 stars. It's a shaky 4. I wanted to do somewhere between 3.5 and 4 because the main character got on my nerves so many times. I mean, I enjoyed the story and what was going on, but there was so much of it that got on my nerves. She really, maybe she's just a little too young for me, but I don't know. I liked it. And at the same time, she was very annoying. Anyway, so what happens is she is in some kind of weird fantasy time loop situation where every time she dies, she kind of restarts where she got sucked into this world. And we meet her after she's been doing this for like 1,000 years. She doesn't even know how long it's been, how many times she's been reborn and had to restart over because she's been killed. And to the point where if she doesn't like the way it's going, she'll just kill herself and start right back at the beginning. So there are some trigger warnings in here about suicidal ideations and all of the stuff having to do with the self-harm and the other things that she does just because she's not actually dying. So yes, she's killing herself, but she's coming right back to life. So she knows it's not like a permanent thing. So we meet her after she's done this a long time, and she's like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done trying to be the good guy and save people. I am becoming the Dark Lord. And so that's what she does. So we follow her as she's like gathering minions. And what's funny is nobody knows what the word minion means. So she's like, come minions. And they're just like, okay, they don't know what that means. It's really funny. I mean, there are parts of it that's so funny. And then parts of it where I was like, girl, you are on my nerves. Okay. Anyway. And it has a cute love story in the middle of all of that I enjoyed as well. So I will be continuing with Dark Lord Davi, the series, and see what happens. And then finally, the last series that I started, I did not know it was a series until I was entering all my information in here for us to be able to look at the stats. And I was like, oh, that's a series. So I don't know that I'm going to continue with the series. I gave it 3.5 stars, The Watchmaker of Filigree Street. I was so intrigued by this and I really wanted to like it. We're following 2 people who are making their way through London, 1884 in London. So if you know British history and the history of the whole Great Britain situation, number one, you're better than me. I had to do some Googling. So if I have anything wrong, please feel free to correct me down below. There were quite a few Irish organizations that were trying to get out from under British rule. And the way they were doing that was by bombing things. From 1881 to 1884/5, they are setting off bombs. The main one that they talk about in the book is Clan Nagale, which is listed when I went to Google this. It's listed as one of the entities that were trying to stop the British rule. In fact, at one point, at the end of 1884, they tried to blow up London Bridge, but something went wrong and their boat blew up instead and killed the people who were trying to set the bombs. Anyway, that was like the end of the whole bombing situation that kind of stopped. I mean, I just feel like the chemicals would have been unstable in the 1880s. Like they didn't know how to stabilize things a little bit. So that's very dangerous. Anyway, of course it's dangerous, but they're blowing up buildings and different things in London at this time, and our guy works in a telegraph office in London. And because of his connections and because a watch is mysteriously dropped off at his house, he is asked by the Home Office to handle some things for them. So I got to learn a little bit more about the Home Office and the Foreign Office and all of that stuff than I knew before. And I learned a little bit about the 1880s in London. It seemed to be a pretty scary place, especially if you had a government job. Anyway, I gave it 3.5 stars. Like I said, I don't know if I'm continuing. I loved the premise. I loved the setting. I really liked the writing. I thought that they did a really good job of setting the scene and where we were and what it was like. My only problem was the characters. Especially, like, there were 2 characters that we were following. One of them I kind of liked, and I felt like they were doing like the best that they could do. The other one I felt like was oblivious to things and ended up hurting other people because he just wouldn't like make choices. And then when he did make those choices, it just really hurt other people. And I was like, come on, dude, let's be nicer than that. So anyway, that is The Watchmaker of Filigree Street. And it looks like books 2 and 3, there's 3 books, I think, in the series. And the second and third books don't follow the same people or the same time even. So I don't know. I'll check into it and I'll see if I want to continue. If somebody wants to try to convince me, I'm open to it. Okay, I'm going to quickly go through the series that I finished in the first half because I already talked about those. Not finished, but kept reading. Continued, I guess, and then we'll go into more depth in the others. So I read number 12 in Saga. I read the number 3 book in Lawless. That's part of the Lexi Blake series. So I read that one. I read number 6 in the Taylor Jackson series and number 2 in Molly the Maid series. I cannot wait for number 3. I read 11 and 12 in the Earth Divers series. And I read number 2 in the Crimson Club. I actually probably should have brought that up because I never read book 1. I skipped it. So technically, I've only read 1 book in that series and I'm starting a new series. So I guess I should have talked about it there, but I talked about that in the first half of the month. Then I read number 9 in the Lady Hardcastle series. I love it so much. I read number 4 in Why the Last Man series. Then I read number 3 in the Nightmareland Chronicles. It's a reread. I've already read all the way to book 6. That's all that's been out. That's all that is out so far. So I'm rereading those this year. So I finished Nightmareland Chronicles book 3, which is Sleepwalking. I gave it 5 stars. That is another 5 stars. Oh, I didn't tell y'all. Yes, I did. In the first half of the month, I told you that I read An Act of Foul Play, which is the Lady Hardcastle. Y'all, I don't even remember what I talked about in the first half. I'm going to have to start making myself a little note here that says this is where you stopped talking about books. But I gave it 5 stars. So I had 3 5 stars this month. Anyway, Nightmareland, Sleepwalking. We are still following the same main characters. We have added in another person who is now a main character, and they are still traveling. I said this one was mostly set in Nevada as they're making their way to we don't know exactly where they're going. I feel like they're going to the Colorado area from California. Am I right? Were they in California? I think they were in California, and they're making their way to Colorado. We find out more about John's past and him being where he came from, how he was raised, and things like that. And then we follow Maria and somebody else, and we find out a lot more about them. This was my favorite when I first read the series. And then when I read the next book, it became my favorite. And then when I read the book 6, it became my favorite. So we'll see. From now on, I like every book a little bit better than the one that came before. At least that's the way I remember it. We're going to see what happens as I go forward. But anyway, we're still following John, Maria, and somebody. I want to say who it is in case you haven't read it. I don't want you to get to that in the previous book and be like, oh, he's important. So somebody. And that's it. Then I read book 9 of the Discworld, which was Eric. I gave it 4.5 stars. This might be my favorite, second favorite Discworld book. I had so much fun. I mean, it's Rincewind. Anything that follows Rincewind is my favorite in the Discworld. So they will continue to be my favorites. I think I'm going to love it. Now, Finally, that is the end of the books. Let's look at the stats. Okay, well, we can see over here that in February, I read 25 things. We can also see right here, 23 were adult and 2 young adult. So no middle grade at all in February. Right under me, we can see, let me move up. We can see that 4 were graphic novels and 21 were novels. We can see over here, 7 fantasy, 5 romance, 4 sci-fi, 2 historical fiction. Like the sci-fi and historical fiction are higher than normal. 2 horror, that's actually a little bit lower. 2 mystery, 2 thriller, and 1 fiction. That's what I had in the month of February. I always like to look at the years that something was published, even though there's so many of them. There's no rhyme or reason, but 20% of mine were published in 2023. And then the next highest was 2024. Then we go to 2013 and 2022 and 2011 randomly. Oh, and 2020. They all had 8%. All of those. That's so weird to me. And then all the rest of the years. I just think it's really funny. So then how did I read them? 3 paperbacks. Those were mostly graphic novels. 19 audiobooks, 2 ebooks, and 1 hardcover. So even the hardcover, if I had a hardcover and I was doing it on audio and hardcover, I think I just counted it as hardcover. If I was going back and forth, I counted it not audio, if that makes sense. Audio are just the ones that I read straight audio all the way through without the physical book. Okay, then my series is, I have 15 in progress, 5 standalones, 2 completed to publication date, 2 completed, and 1 DNF for the series. Now, my favorite part all the time is the world maps, and we have Canada and the United States. Then over here, I only have England and Nepal. So Nepal was my country for February that I was going to be reading from. And so I did that and I completed it. I can't wait to see what this looks like with all the things for January and February. So we'll look at that in just a second. Then we have the states. I had more books in Pennsylvania than anywhere else, which is so weird. But look at all these states. I mean, this is a good spread of the states for the month of February. So we're going to stay right here on this one, looking at the maps. And I'm going to go turn on January as well. Okay, so here we go. We have a lot. I mean, we still have the most in Pennsylvania, which is so weird. Pennsylvania is still up here at 3. But when I hover over them, you can see down at the bottom, it tells you where. So 1 in Mississippi, 2 in Tennessee, 3 in Pennsylvania. I hope that makes sense. 2 in New York, 2 in Massachusetts, 1 in Maine. Like, we're kind of everywhere. 2 California, Texas, and Nebraska. 2 in Nebraska. Who am I? Look at this. Utah, Colorado, Nevada. Like, we are really doing it over here. I'm so proud of the way the U.S. map is looking. Let's look at the world. And I hate to say that it kind of looks the same. We do have 1 France. We have 1 England, 1 Canada, 1 U.S. That's not true. Oh, it's just not lighting them up. Why is it not lighting them up? I've got to have 29 set in the U.S. and it's not changing the colors. I don't understand. When I hover over it, it says 1 down in the bottom corner. And there's definitely more than 1 in all of those places. So it even has Canada as being higher up than the U.S. So weird. And then, oh, that's part of France. And we have Nepal. Okay, so let's scroll up and see the genres. I love it. First of all, let's look at the total. 50 books total, 25 in each month. I'm not trying to read 25 books a month. It just keeps happening. We're going to be addressing it. Don't worry. 11 romance, 12 fantasy. Those are my top 2 genres. They always are, as is horror and sci-fi. The rest of them are all sprinkled in like they usually are. Sci-fi might not usually be that big. And if we put thriller and mystery together, that would be the same as sci-fi, 6, because thriller is 3 and mystery is 3. So together they would be the same as sci-fi. So that's pretty good. I'm still mostly reading for adults. I'm still mostly reading novels with some novellas, graphic novels, those kinds of things thrown in. I am still reading things on audiobook more than anything else. And out of the 50 books, only 11 have been standalones. I'm covering up that stat. And then here is just our pretty wheel with all the colors of the publication years because I like looking at it. That is it. My average rating is still a 4. even with the 2.5 on there, I think I have another one that is a 2. The 3 and 3.5s that I'm giving this year and the stingy 5s, I still end up averaging 4, which I thought was going to be different. I don't hate it. I just thought it was going to be different. If you look at the total pages I've read, 13,537, and you look at the total hours listened, just divide that number in half because I never listen to an audiobook less than 2 times speed. I listen to almost all of them at 2 times speed. So I have not spent 380.78 hours of my life listening. It's been half of that. 150 plus 40 is 190, like 190 hours listening. Okay, that's it. That is going to do it for the wrap up of February. Thank you. If you stuck through it with me, let me know if you're surprised by any of these stats based on what you know about my reading and how it went in January. What did you think about February? I am surprised that it's been 25 books each month. Like, I really thought that the way I was doing books was going to slow things down, and that has not seemed to be the case. So maybe I reevaluate in Q2, but y'all let me know maybe what your favorite book of February was. Mine was The Humane Society for Creatures and Cryptids. I loved it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.